AI is the future. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 plus years. I was year before the internet. I was year before the personal computer. I was year before, the cell phone. So I've seen those innovations. I've seen what they've done to humanity and how it's impacted society in many great ways. But I've never seen what AI is doing in the speed it's doing it at. Every year, it's doing incredible innovations.
Welcome to Bits, Bytes, and Beyond, the podcast that takes you beyond the buzzwords and deep into the real-world challenges of moving your data. I'm Trent Blakely, Head of Product Marketing at PCCW Global Console Connect. In each episode, we'll unpack a specific technical subject, break down what's really going on, and explore how to solve it. Whether you're a CIO, a network engineer, or simply the person who always gets asked, is it the network? Then you're in the right place. This isn't thought leadership, it's technical leadership. Now let's get into it. Today, my guests are Pascal Menezes from Mplify, the CTO there, and Divesh Gupta. And why don't we start with a quick round of intros. Again, I'm Trent Blakely, Head of Product Marketing for Console Connect, PCCW Global. I am based in Colorado. Pascal, over to you for a brief intro. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. I'm the CTO of Mplify, and we are a standards organization, really working on network as a service. And we start with Carrier Ethernet, and really I'm based on the West Coast, right in Seattle, right down there from Microsoft, and been in the industry for a very, very long time. So very exciting times.
Thank you so much for being here. Divesh, over to you.
Hey Trent, Pascal, good to start the new year with you on a podcast. Well, my name is Divesh Gupta. I'm based out of Hong Kong, and I'm the VP for Professional Services and Technology at PCCW Global. Just a quick recap. Last year, we had two major, I would say, accomplishments in the professional services team. One was that we got 4 of our APIs Mplify certified, which are now in production and active use. So we're kind of pretty proud of that to kind of conform to open standards. And the second was that we launched another professional services called a private label for our resellers who are able to use and experience NAS firsthand. So we're excited for the new year. And let's start with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Divesh. Yeah, so today's topic, we're going to cover actually a variety of things, but we've been longtime members of Mplify or MEF as it used to be known. And I think I'd kick it off with this question of just that WAN as a market, as a space, is really at a crossroads. And so with open standards and automation all converging together, the first question I wanted to ask is what kind of shifts are you seeing at the industry level, and what opportunities do those shifts, opportunities or risks do those shifts create? Let's go with you, Pascal, first.
There's massive transformation, and probably the first time for a very long time, we're seeing the wide area network being very, very important for AI. Everybody's moving to build AI infrastructures in every country, the world. And what we're doing in Mplify, we've been doing network as a, we started with Carrier Ethernet, then we went to network as a service, we had business workloads, but now we're actually working on network as a service for AI. And to answer your question specifically, you have to think within data centers, there's a scale up, which is tying all the GPUs together at a very, very low latency, so it look like one big cluster. Then there's scale out, which is to take those racks and build factories out of it, and then there's scale across, which means how do you tie all these factories on a global level and then also at the edges. So for training and inference, we're going to see the wide area network being very, very crucial. So we at Mplify are working on obviously Carrier Ethernet, and we're having a Carrier Ethernet for certification for AI coming out, which will have certain performance objectives and making sure it runs right, and availability and jumbo frames and high bandwidth capabilities for training. But inference also will be part of that. And we have layer 2 or Carrier Ethernet or broadband and making sure, the SLAs work right and we have classes of services and so on. So we're doing it for carrier Ethernet, but we also are doing it for wavelengths because wavelengths are important between data centers and training. And then there's also the idea of IP fabrics. And then we're also seeing SD-WAN, and we've also pioneered that in the way of standards and certification. And we're seeing putting SD-WAN even to tie this across. So we're seeing vendors apply these kind of techniques. So the wide area is becoming very, very interesting, very, very fast for AI, to be honest.
That is very interesting indeed. I mean, so many different layers, so many different nuances to account for, and those different technologies. And like you said, the kind of that convergence, it really highlights the importance of standardization, right? Being able to make sure that all these things can interoperate, right? Divesh, what would you add to this question? What are you seeing?
Well, see, we've been seeing these two themes play out. We had the discussion during the Mplify Global NAS event last year in Dallas, and also I attended the TM Forum event here in Bangkok, in Asia. There are these themes about NAS for AI and then AI for NAS, right? So, what do we mean by that? It's basically when you say, WANs at a crossroad. It's about not just purely moving packets, it's the intent-based autonomous networks, and on-demand basis that can be, provided in that scenario. So if you look at, the infrastructure built based on AI, you have these H100s or NVIDIA chips, Google has their TPUs, and all these big hyperscale developments, they are deployed in liquid-cooled data centers, right? That's where the LLMs are getting trained. But the action is all on the edge now. The inference side and the AI agents that are being launched, those are being trained on proprietary, or I would say non-public data, enterprise data. And they're being used in the edge also. So, I mean, there is definitely a requirement to connect from these large hyperscaler cloud infrastructures to the edge. And that's where NAS would play the role. That's what I see that, going forward, we need to provide a kind of an interface, a NAS to work with AI agents and be programmable so that, wherever they need. Well, you could use, for instance, you could use internet to connect in this scenario, but it works until it doesn't. And if it doesn't, there isn't any SLA to support or back. And that's where, telcos like us, PCCW Global, we build our infrastructures resilient enough so that if a primary route fails, we kind of move to the backup, right? And we provide those 5 nines. So I'm sure that there are going to be mission critical applications out there that need to connect, the LLMs to their enterprise workloads, and that's where NAS is going to play a big role.
No, excellent point. I mean,
Divesh, yeah, Divesh, you made a very good point about agents. I did want to say something about that, Trent.
sure.
At the very top of when I did the keynote at GNE in November last year, I talked about this. We're moving to the agentic realm of AI agents everywhere. We're going to see billions of agents. Every application will be infused with AI into it, and they'll act like agents now. They'll be fully autonomous. They can reason. They'll interact with other agents. They'll interact with models, but they also have reinforcement learning. So they'll reinforce themselves in learning, do they get it right or wrong? And these agents will interact with models and other agents, and they need a high quality network. And we need to have the agents having guardrails and security, cybersecurity built into it. So the fabric of a new AI infrastructure is not just about bandwidth and quality. It also has to have the ability to also protect and deliver cybersecurity on this AI fabric from all of these potential threats, agents, models. So there's so many things that are happening that becomes the network, the center of attraction, and that's what we're seeing in every sovereign AI deployment. We're seeing the telco being at the heart of that, because the infrastructure is critical.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you bring up you're touching on some other things that we're going to get into in future questions, but I'd say a lot of it kind of all roads lead to the WAN in that sense. There's a lot of tailwinds that will help increase NAS adoption around the world, I think. So you also brought up AI. I mean, that's a good segue to, I think, the next topic we want to dive into. These agents, these MCP servers, product payloads, whether it's Ethernet, internet, or wavelengths, and then the LSO API adapters themselves. How are these technologies really enabling the infrastructure to be AI ready, and for the WAN to be AI ready?
Yeah. So if you think about network as a service, what does that mean? It means a network that's highly automated and it's programmable, it's elastic, and it has layers of set of services, not just dumb transports, but it's built in with cybersecurity and all kinds of access to all kinds of hybrid clouds, clouds of AI clouds, neo clouds, so on. And so when you think about this, how this all has to come together, the automation aspects play a very critical role. So you saw Console Connect do a really great demo. The CTO, Paul Gamp, did a phenomenal demo about how this all comes together. So we've been building for a decade these automation APIs to interconnect the ecosystem. And, to implement these things, you have to talk about versions and all that stuff. We also build data models on these APIs because you have to understand the language about what you're talking about for carry Ethernet, for SD-WAN, for IP, for wavelengths. So we've built those data models too for the last decade. So now what's really interesting is you now apply this idea of this model context protocol, which is just JSON over RPC. And what it does, it basically puts a wrapper around your API that AI agents and models don't have to understand or integrate your APIs into at all. They just talk to the MCP server, they discover what are the API operational capabilities through methods, and then they can understand the resources that will come across those methods in the way of our data models. And so this becomes very powerful because now our whole mission has been building the ecosystem so it's fully global ecosystem interoperating with other providers, enterprises, other kinds of technology providers. And to do that, in the past, has been a lot of tightly coupled integration. And now with MCP, we can now abstract that all out, make it very loosely integration. And now we have models that come across that can understand. And importantly, the agents can interact with these MCP servers, and the agents themselves can work with models. And so the whole thing becomes highly automated with this agentic realm and models. And then the APIs become just the access to the outside world, the outside systems in the way of the telco systems and so on. So that's how we're positioning it.
I love that. No, and I love that framing that you're using about just being a wrapper, right? I think it's reducing the need for individual SDKs and for one API for one connection or one function, and really kind of being more of that a single, the one ring to rule them all, so to speak. Divesh, what would you add to that?
So I would say that, MCP is really an inflection point in APIs connected to NAS, how we can play that out in the NAS environment or network as a service. And it's really like, we've been working on integrating East-West APIs with our carriers, downstream carriers, providers, or with upstream, partners all this while. And we are working on standardizing APIs. But we basically make it easier for the companies to test and interoperate, but you still need to do custom integrations, right? You need to be able to look and study at what's the a particular API providing and how to integrate with it, right? There is amount of effort required there. With MCP server, it becomes, the entry becomes so much easier because that complexity is all borne by the agent. So you have a large LLM now, which is all that, all encompassing powerful technology. So it can look at standard documentation that you produce. It could understand what the API does, what is behind it, and what are the data models. And then it can actually enhance the functionality because now it can perform tasks. You look at currently, instead of any integration into our network, you could just talk to an agent. It could be a chat GPT or a Claude agent, and it invokes our APIs in the backend to perform tasks like, listing all the data centers we have at a particular city, picking a data center, getting a quote, even placing an order, and then getting to know whether the order has been delivered. All of that just by using prompts. So
Hmm.
it's very powerful. And you
Yeah.
see how to connect that these days. All the big, CRM companies or SaaS companies, name a few, let's say Salesforce, they have an agent force AI agent incorporated into their CRM. ServiceNow has Assist, Now Assist. So all of these big CRM providers, they're going to have agents. And then if you have your APIs exposed through an AI agent, it becomes that much more easier to consume your network. So I'm looking at it from a career standpoint. How do I make it easier for an enterprise to consume my network? That's where it is. You
Hmm.
open it up to using MCP servers to AI agents, which can then be used to program through the CRM. So they don't basically, the customers never need to leave their CRM or their apps that they're working on daily basis. So that's very powerful.
That is very powerful. Yeah, I think we're trending towards that, the need for a super app, right, where you can just do all your tasks in a single place. And I think we've touched on a few things that I think are foundational to the rest of our conversation, right? We talked about how interoperability is critical, especially in, a multi-cloud, multi-provider environment. And, we've touched a little bit about on how open standards are helping networks keep pace with all this change. I think, one of the other things to note here is that like AI is often like a junior engineer where, if there's good documentation and a clearly outlined task, it can do a lot. And they're getting better. It's getting it's getting promoted from junior to maybe standard level engineer, right? So where are there still gaps that exist in this environment? What do you think?
Did you want me to take that, Divesh?
Yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things. If you talk about the agentic realm, what we spend a long time is documenting our APIs and our models. So what you find with an agent, if you do an order agent or a quote agent or a performance agent, they have to understand the state machines that they have to think about, like logic. So I actually showed this and demonstrated. I took our APIs, I took our documentation, I took our models, pumped it into ChatGPT or Gemini, it doesn't matter. And I said, hey, create me an agent blueprint for an order. So I put an order API and I put the payloads of the carry the payloads, for example, and I'll put exactly how an agent should behave. I think that is what's going to be important because you have to have very predictable behavior if these agents are going to interact with the provider and they replace the prompting of a human being because a human being can adjust, but an agent has this kind of workflow it has to think through and it has to interact with other agents. Also, there's a dependency. So I think that is one thing, these blueprints of what we're going to do is provide blueprints of how agent behavior should be against the MCP server, which represents our APIs and our data models. So that's one thing. The second one is because we work in tying the ecosystem together, the critical part is the trust part. How do I know an agent is trusted and can do its thing and its identity and its credentials and its authorization, but also, its fingerprint. If it does something rogue, what are the guardrails so I can fingerprint what it's doing? How can I make sure there's audit logs? How do I keep it audited? So I think this whole trust network, which we're seeing a lot of the identity providers move into providing this agent orchestration with identity and authorization. And I think it's more going to be decentralized. So I think that has not been put in place. So agents interacting directly with providers have to have this trust in place to say, I can trust this agent. And then also, does this agent go rogue and do stupid things? And so
Yeah.
these are the things they still have to work out.
I
I
like how you
definitely agree
frame.
with you.
Could I add one thing? This
Yeah.
idea of a blueprint as a bridge, that's fantastic. I think that's so critical for us to reach, that higher level of trust because there's a lot of skepticism around what AI can and cannot actually do. A lot of hearsay, a lot of, skeptics that will just completely dismiss it and throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Sorry, what were you going to say, Divesh?
No, sorry. Yeah, I was just building on what Pascal mentioned, the security aspect of it, and I think it's very critical. And I think this is where alliances like Amplify can play a role. That we could discuss that along with our fellow carriers and other members in the council or in the alliance, and create a security framework or a governance framework around these newer technologies, be it agent to agent communication or MCP servers that kind of allow an agent to work with an API, right? An interesting piece, I would say that, so there is a discovery functionality that is built in the MCP server, which makes it that powerful. And what it does is it just basically goes out and discovers what APIs a provider has. If you've given it the proper authorization and credentials, it can go figure out what these APIs do, and it can actually be very exhaustive there. So there is a risk that, sensitive data can be exposed. It could be that, a business logic which was not supposed to be exposed is exposed because of this discovery functionality that's there. It's very, very powerful, right? So we need to have a security framework, and it cannot be done in isolation. It has to be done through a central agency or a neutral body like Amplify or Team Forum, things like that. And the other thing I would say is agents normally, up until now, I mean, we've only started experimenting it in the last quarter of 25 rather, is that, agents do one specific thing really good. So if you give an example, let's say, you want to build an agent to book you flight tickets, it would be good at that. Maybe it will have all the APIs for different flight carriers, and then you need another agent to maybe book you a hotel ticket. Okay. So if you do a multitasking agent, doesn't work that well. That's what I understand from what's been in the practice. So there would be, and we'll end up having multiple agents doing multiple works. And how do we interoperate? That there has to be a guardrails. There has to be a security framework under which they would work, like what Pascal mentioned. If one agent goes rogue, how do you eliminate that? How do you prevent that from happening? So I think those are the gaps we need to fill before this becomes fully productional technology, and you lease it out in the open, right? You need to basically. I think it has to be in the design. It cannot be an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the most common way people are addressing that is with a human in the loop right now, but
Yes.
that kind of defeats the purpose in a lot of ways. We got to get past that.
Yes. Yeah.
Pascal, did you want to add
Yeah,
anything else? I saw you came off mute.
yeah. Actually, so Devesh makes a very good point. So I'm tasked now. I was tasked to build up the AI strategy for Amplify, and it took me a year to make sure all the members were agreeing on it, and the board and our advisory board. So it was a lot of iterations to get the brain of and the brainstorming of everybody and to finally land it. Now, what we're going to be working on is, and so, but we already have this for business side, the NAS for business. We already have SASE certification. So we standardize SD-WAN, SSE, Zero Trust, and SASE, and we have certifications on that already. So now we're building this NAS for AI. And as Devesh talked about, what is this cybersecurity framework that makes sure things run right? So it so happens to all our advisory board on Mplify are the top guys in SASE and all the top cybersecurity vendors. And they've already got products out in this area to guardrail AI and protect AI. So what's missing is the identity providers. So I'm working with them now. And I'm actually, what we've done for a decade is we describe the whole life cycle. So when Devesh talks about agents, specialized agents, we already went through an addressing, a quoting, and an ordering, a performance, a fault, a billing, a troubleshooting, all these APIs. We have about 20 APIs across the life cycle that allows two providers or enterprises to communicate in this ecosystem view. So what we now do is we're describing these blueprints. The agents will work from each of these life cycle parts. And then also I'm working on now on the strategy in a federation. How will a federation appear or federations that utilize all the standard assets from Amplify across the ecosystem? And part of that is this identity has to be the root, the root of trust. It has to be critical. where the identity is federated itself. So stay tuned. I'm working on the strategy with the members and everybody. But this federation will appear from Mplify sometime in 2026. And I think that will answer the question is how do you guardrail and secure and make sure these agents perform right when they're cross autonomies? Inside an autonomy, inside a provider, they use vendors, certain vendors, they already have certain security and guardrails and policies that make sure. So I think zero trust plays a critical role, AI firewalls, all these things. So we'll upgrade our SASE cybersecurity for AI. So
That's
Love
good.
that. No, it always makes me chuckle when people, there's this almost an inter-conflict or the juxtaposition of like, okay, we're zero trust. Our architecture is fully, that's our starting point. But then we actually do want to get to a point where an identity and, a password and a user can be trusted, right? So there's this weird sort of tension there. But I wanted to make another kind of aside, and we probably should have started with this, but like as a standards body, right? These all the different standards bodies, right? I'd like to draw some parallels between, the standards bodies that exist in our industry and the ones that exist in other industries, right? That function of these alliances, what does that play and what parallels can we draw to other industries? Does that make sense?
yeah, look, standards play a very critical role for a specific thing. They're not meant to commoditize, right? I mean, some people think if I go to standard, I commoditize myself, a product vendor or a service provider. That's not what it's about. Standards are meant, I think personally, if you look at Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, those things have been very successful, HDMI, they allow things to interoperate and plug and play in a general big ecosystem, right? And that's kind of what we're doing in Mplify. We're not trying to solve within the provider's network how to do automation. That's TM Forum. They've been doing that for decades. What we're doing is we're building the ecosystem out that they can plug and play and things work, whether it be the enterprise buying from a provider or two providers working in a partnership in an ecosystem, including technology providers, cloud providers. That's really our game. And that's what we've been doing for a decade. And then we've been playing, all the different service layers, carry Ethernet of transports, wavelengths IP. But we went to SD-WAN, we went to SSE, Zero Trust, SASE, and then this whole idea of cloud and, the edge cloud. We haven't talked about the edge yet, but the edge is coming in because micro data centers are coming in. We're going to see, models sit right at the edge doing inference for, automation for factories or, smart warehouses or smart cities. These edges are going to play a very critical role. And I was just reading an article how, everybody feels the edges coming in. And I think that's why NVIDIA bought, Grok for so much money because they have that inference chipset. So I think inference is going to be a very, very critical role coming forward. Everything wants to be inferred at very, 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 very low latency. So
I love what you said about how it's not about commoditization, right? Ultimately it makes the pie bigger, it makes the market bigger for everyone. And you bring up a really good point, Pascal. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the edge. What do you think people are missing about what's going on at the edge? You already touched on inference, but what else is there?
that NeoClouds have come up with these GPU as a service, right? And it makes sense, but I think sovereign AI is coming in fast. The geopolitical landscapes, every country knows that AI is the future. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 plus years. I was here before the internet. I was here before the personal computer. I was here before, the cell phone. So I've seen those innovations. I've seen what they've done to humanity and how it's impacted society in many great ways. But I've never seen what AI is doing in the speed it's doing it at. Every year, it's doing incredible innovations. And I think what's happening is what we're not understanding is how to implement these edges with micro data centers at the far end or near end. And I think these edges are going to appear very, very fast and they'll interact with the regional models and so on. And I think this has still not, because right now we're talking about AI factories, these gigawatt factories, massive, massive things, but they're really meant for training. But when you look at, you want to infer some things, and various kind of like computer vision is inferring. I have a car. It's a Tesla, to be honest with you. And, I download new models to my car, but it's inferring from the cameras as I'm driving. So in latency is critical. So you're going to see a lot of this ideas, especially computer vision, that latency becomes very, very important. And the model has to sit at the edge. And the chipsets that need for inferring are nothing like the training chipsets. They're not $30,000, $40,000 chipsets. They could be sub 1,000 even. And I think you're going to see more and more of that coming in. So I think there'll be this GPU kind of model where you're loading in models at the edges for doing computer vision, smart cities, smart warehouse, smart factories. All of this will need models further out, right by the robots. And of course, we're seeing, physical AI appear all over. If you look at the keynote from Jensen, that's from NVIDIA at the CES conference, it's pretty impressive of what's coming out really fast. So I think the world is changing rapidly. Every year it's a new theme. And we just have reasoning models came out in early 2025 that disrupted everybody. And then agentic AI has now become the wave. And I just think this is going to continue. So
I thought your point was so important, Pascal, in that, differentiating between the characteristics of the workload of an AI training workload versus an AI inference workload. They're incredibly different. And I think a lot of people just look at AI as sort of a monolithic thing. Like you're saying, some of these inference workloads, they run just fine on pretty basic CPU hardware.
yeah, but I also think that we have to separate out inference in a way that, when we actually built a carry Ethernet over broadband because we figured out that, hey, there's going to be more and more this carry Ethernet wants to just connect to peripherals, the cameras and sensors and all that. And the model needs all of that input. It's like, our brain needs all our arms and legs, and that has to function in some way. So we also see NAS at the edges where you're going to see this network fabric that's highly intelligent, elastic, programmable. We actually worked with Camara and GSMA to launch out also that. We launched out in November how we'll increase quality, communication quality with through the Camara APIs. And I think Camara APIs will be front end also with these MCP servers. And I think you'll have agents using these Camara APIs with MCP servers. So I think the world is changing really fast, and these edges play a very, very critical role. So we see the edge also needing a NAS fabric. It's not just between the data centers, but also at the edge, the NAS fabric has to be there. It has to be very, very pervasive, and you can use it whether you're using coming across a LEO satellite to get to some peripheral or 5G fixed wireless access or a broadband loop. Carry Ethernet has the characteristics of a classes of services. It has performance, it has fault. All these services that you can run on top of a broadband loop is very powerful. So we actually put the standard out. It's done. We're building the payloads for it now for automation. I think the edge is going to be a very, very critical aspect, as Divesh said.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, like you brought up about the different access methods and how important it will be to have optionality, diversity of access methods, but still in a NAS experience attached to it.
Exactly.
So we're running short on time. I wanted to get to a couple of the other topics we wanted to touch on. So where are service providers from your perspective, Pascal, especially for you, service providers and enterprises, where are they most underestimating the operational or organizational challenges of building AI-ready WANs? And how can we overcome those hurdles?
I think generally the public is very concerned about AI. You're seeing big, big debates about regulation of AI in parts of the world that they want to regulate, and other parts of the world, here in the US, they don't want to regulate. Some states want to regulate it, government doesn't want to regulate it. They don't feel they can compete effectively against other governments, so on. So I think, this whole idea of how AI will emerge is going to be very, very critical. And the regulation that will play into that will also be very, very important. So, I think we're still in the early days, and it's hard to figure out with sovereign AI and every country putting in their own AI spin. And as you're seeing, Canada, Germany, I think that we are just at the as I talk to providers worldwide, they're still trying to figure out the roadmap of how do they convert all their assets to AI readiness. And that's what Mplify is now doing for NAS for AI. Is we're building all the assets to get them in the ready. If they've got transports, how do you become AI ready for your transport? If you have an SD-WAN offering, how do you become ready for an SD-WAN offering? And so certification, APIs, all the stuff we're doing just ports right over to make them AI ready. And I think AI, that's where the money is. Look, we looked at analysis. It's $15 trillion plus or minus 20%. It's still a massive amount of money. It's new revenue, new money. Instead of the business workloads, it's AI workloads. Everybody wants to get into the AI game. And I think it's a massive opportunity for the service providers. And it's just about how do you get your products there? And that's what Mplify is now doing, is to helping our members to get them productized with using baseline assets.
Love that you guys are right there in the trenches with all these providers trying to figure it out, help us get there, because it is a tough nut to crack. Devesh, what would you add?
Yeah, I'd basically also like to add a monetizing angle there. So, as we go ahead and launch these AI agents and create functionalities where it's easier for you to to consume the networks, right? Would it be also useful to, so you say if these days large language models, they're charged on tokens, right? So every time you consume a token, you pay for it, and then you get the desired functionality. So what would it be like if we are exposing agents that can consume a network to also monetize that, right? So monetize it on use, not just actual orders onto the network, but if we're providing a essential functionality as to finding out, okay, do you offer a rate which is a per day basis instead of a month, right? How much is it? And that information is relevant for these solutions that are being built on top of NAS in order to gather information and then propose a solution, right? So why not we also start charging based on a token based or per API or per AI agent use? There could be two things. One is it basically becomes a monetizing opportunity for telco or telecom service providers. The other is it could help also mitigate the security angle, because if it's free, it is open for exploits. But if it is pay per use, I mean, anyone who's exploiting, they would have to incur a cost to just bombard an AI agent with a lot of queries, right? So I think it will serve twin purposes. That is something that we think could play out, in the long run.
Very good points. Love that. So I think for our final question or topic, as automation and open APIs mature, what new bottlenecks or unintended consequences are emerging in the WAN ecosystem? And along with that, how should the industry adapt to avoid repeating past mistakes?
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to be thinking about is the post-quantum era. If our transmission systems are encrypted naturally with AES 512, standard kind of encryption, whether it be a MACsec tunnel or IPsec tunnel or OTNs, use encryptions, can carry encryption. We have to think about quantum safe networking. We have to think of our networks being very safe from anybody being able to get to the data. And so I think what we're working on now is quantum safe networking across all the transports, because we think that is a very, very critical aspect. And then finally, how we'll certify that. So that's where I'm thinking. Love to hear Divesh's point of view.
I'm thinking that, as the open APIs mature, the bottlenecks is going to be on multi-agent collaboration. Basically, what I'm trying to say is if you have a very well lit framework under which, majority of the carriers can operate, it becomes easier for us to kind of operate in that level. But if it is, if you look at, I'm relating it with our past experience where we used to have n number of APIs, each custom built from carrier to carrier, it doesn't scale. So I think that problem would remain here. That's why we kind of need to standardize and have a framework under which this will operate. That's what I would say.
Very good points. No, I really appreciate your perspective, and this has been a great conversation so far. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
No, thank you, Trent. Really appreciate it. Nice seeing you, Divesh.
Thanks.
All right,
Thanks,
bye
Pascal.
now.
Thanks for your time. Yeah.